All right, we are live. Today we are joined by Kirk, all the way from sunny California. And Amy and I are sitting here in a gray day in Northern Virginia after a snowstorm this weekend. So we're hoping that you can bring us some sunshine. But do you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm Kirk Brennan. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the director of undergraduate admission at USC and the father of two amazing daughters and a lucky husband of a wife who's a great cook.
Oh, okay. My mother's a great cook also, so we had a great salad for lunch today. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes.
And tell us what name you're going to go by today?
Okay. My name is Emily Silla, and I'm going to go by Amy today. And then I'm also a senior at Hilton High School, and I'm an ambassador for the College Admissions Support Group run by Jen the Tutor.
Okay. So the one question I'm getting asked so much right now, and I get it from freshmen, sophomore, but mostly juniors, is like, how should I be preparing for college admissions? And I'm going to add a caveat because I have parents of juniors come to me all the time and they say, I'm so sorry, we haven't done anything for college admissions. Like, we're so behind the ball. Like, I know it's too late, but like, is there any opportunities out there for me? And it's always confusing to me. But Kirk, what advice would you give to juniors and parents of juniors?
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and answer questions for your audience. I think it works best when students don't worry about what I think, but that they worry about what they need and what they want to pursue. And that also has to happen. There is a lot to think about with respect to process stuff. Deadlines, filing, what documents you have to file, what paperwork you have to have in order, what academic records, what teachers you might want to ask to file recommendation letters if the colleges you might apply to need that. There's a lot of logistical steps, and I think the trap is when families think that that's what the college admission process is all about. It is what the steps are, but when we're thinking about candidates, we are asking essentially, all of us colleges are asking essentially the same basic questions, which are not really what is asked in the prompts in the application forms. We really want to get to know a person and understand how we will be together when we're studying together. So the essential questions are: who are you? Where have you come from? Where have you been? And where are you going? What is your goal? And how can we partner? How can we work in partnership to help you and us achieve our mutual goals? And I'm 54 now. I feel like when we were kids, we didn't have phones, and our parents threw us onto the lawn and made us go out of the house, and we played in the street or we played in the park, and
until the light came on.
Until the street lights came on, absolutely. And we did whatever we wanted to, and we imagined what life could be like on our own. And I think that helped. I wish students had that opportunity, and maybe that's the aging Gen Xer in me thinking about my experience, but I don't feel like, I feel like all of my friends had some sense of a plan, and I feel like a lot of students today are so busy with so many things that they haven't necessarily taken the time to retreat and reflect and dream. So I think the secret to college admission is taking time to dream and then communicating to us what that dream kind of looks like. Now, look, we're not expecting a student to lay out the plan that they're going to follow. 2/3 of students at USC change their majors. Half of those change schools within the university. And we're not holding a student to the plan that they conceived of when they were a junior looking at a Zoom webinar. but we want some sense of direction so that we can understand what a student will be like. In other words, you kind of know the answers already, especially if you imagine those questions being asked by your professors or your teachers. You kind of know what your teachers want, and you're kind of doing what you have to do. I can think back to high school. I got a lot of A's in high school, but I also got a lot of 91s. I knew the minimum that I had to do to keep what others saw as a pristine record, but I don't feel I did my best. I could have done better. Others felt like I did very well. So I think this is along that this question of has a student done their very best, helps immunize them from the outside influences that distract us. If a student is confident that they have done what they can do, nobody else can expect a student to do anything that they cannot do. Their parents, teachers, professors will not expect anybody to do what they cannot do. But very often I ask students, have they done their best? And they say, yeah, I did my best. And then I ask, well, could you have done better? And most will casually say, yeah, I could have always done better. And that's the trick. Students can't do their best if they can also feel like they could have done better. Either you did it or you didn't. So I would say, honestly, ask that question of yourself, students. Have you done what you can do? And if not, is that okay? And then the rest kind of falls into place. Where are you headed? Are you doing what you can do to move in that direction? And then you tell us that story in your application. It's a website, so we ask you to, the application is a website. We ask you to carve that story up into little bits and put it into the website. And it's kind of clunky. It would be a lot easier if we could sit down and discuss that vision with you, but we can't. So have a vision and then tell us what that story is and make it difficult for us to say no.
Amy,
that helps.
Yeah, Amy, you're hearing this as a student who used to be a junior, now as a senior. Is that something that you reflected on in your junior year? Like what you've done and what you could be doing the year leading up? Because Amy, you're part of like the COVID generation. So is that something that you were reflecting on?
I think as a junior, I wasn't really thinking, like I was stressing on the fact that like picking colleges. I think that was, as a junior, that's what I was stressing on. But I think the summer going into my senior year is when I was like, okay, now I need to figure out like, what is my application story going to be like? What is the theme of my story? Or like trying to find, I guess my story, trying to find that is like the few months leading up to going, like actually applying to school. But my junior year, I was just confused, I think. I thought I was so behind and like, I didn't know what to do. That's my junior year was just bad.
Yeah. And so, Kirk, you hear her saying, like, what's my application story going to be? I know a lot of people start talking about, like, and I always bring this up because it's so relevant, but like a lot of students are like, what are my stats? Like, how many APs do I need to take? You know, they look at people who've gotten in and they say, like one of the phenomena that we have in this county right now is kids will hand off their transcripts to other kids and be like, this is how I got into this college. And these are the classes that I took. And this is what you have to do. The pathway that you have to follow. This is the guide, right? And when I hear application story, there's something about it that makes me want to like shed my skin because there is such a thing as an application story, but you and I've kind of talked about it has to be your story. And why do you think students and parents don't believe that it should be your story? Like, why do you think there's this idea that there has to be something grand or magnificent to get you into college?
I think you're absolutely right. It is your story, Amy, and your story should be what we see in the application. I think they can be synonymous. If those start to diverge, then I don't believe the application will be as is good because it is not authentic. We want to know who you are. And so when you say your story, I hear what I want. But if we're trying to concoct a story to impress a stranger, then that's not what we want. I hear the question, what are you looking for? And to me, this is the root of what you're getting at, Jen. I'm looking to know who you are, what have you done, where are you going, and why. Why have you made the choices that you've made, and how does that sort of fit into this story, to your story? But people seem to think that I have a specific thing that I'm looking for, and if they could only figure that out and reconfigure their lives around what I want, that they've cracked the code, when in fact the opposite is true. I want to know what they can bring here. I want to please the faculty. Your teachers know what they want in school. My faculty here at the university want, you know what they want. They want students who want to dig in, who want to engage deeply, who want to learn from each other, who want to challenge each other and push the conversation to the next level. That's what they tell us. They want leaders. They want engaged citizens. They want people who really want to work hard and do more than the minimum to keep an A in the class. They don't tell me they want students with 80 hours of community service or 11 AP classes versus 6 AP classes. They don't talk about that at all. And when we're talking about candidates in the admission office, we're not speaking in terms like you're describing. Well, they have to have this stat, or have to have a transcript that looks like this. The reality is we have a lot of candidates applying. If too many candidates applying, then we can accommodate. And so we have to make the best decisions that we can. And so I can understand how from the outside that looks like we're looking for something specific. And so this transcript worked for me. If you do that, it will work for you. Now, if such a conversation serves as a challenge for a student to do what they can do, to do their best, that doesn't feel unhealthy to me. But if that conversation serves as a way to help a student feel like they are not worth it, or worthy of admission anywhere, or that they aren't college material, that has inadvertently done harm, because there is a place in college for every high school student. I believe every high school student deserves higher education, and there is a place. Our system is set up to meet every person where they are and help them get to as high as they can with that kind of work. So the challenge, I think, should be in reverse, should be to students do your best and then find the places that are right for where you are to help you get to the next level.
Right.
There are a lot of great schools doing great things.
Right. And I think that's the thing, is like sometimes we hyper focus on particular schools and particular colleges. And, I feel like, especially in our group, people seem to have this idea coming into the group that I specialize in this type of school or this type of student. And for me, it's more like I can look at a student's capabilities and say, that's a really good fit for this college. Or I think they would value, like, you would be really valued at this college. So I think sometimes students forget that they are the value. And I always tell students, like, I can always tell when a student has tried to do the stats, because I'm like, I could cut at least 3 or 4 things off and still get the same outcome, because your heart wasn't really in it. You were just doing it to check a box. So I think sometimes students feel a lot of pressure. Amy, I know you're in this Northern Virginia climate of pressure all the time, but then we're also in a situation at your high school where you don't have all the options that some of the other high schools nearby. Did you feel the pressure of that?
I think I tried to take all the classes that were, I guess, more advanced, because I knew that other schools in my county, there were better or way more advanced classes. So I tried to take whatever the school had. But I think it also put us down, other students and myself, that we didn't have those classes, because in our heads it was competition. So those
Mm.
students that were at other schools were like better off because they took those classes, you know?
And so sometimes I hear from a lot of students, Kirk, like they feel like it's like a one-to-one model where it's like they're looking at Amy and then they're looking at a student from like the nearby high school. And it's like, well, Amy, you didn't do, I think a lot of students feel like you guys review like that. Like, who am I going to choose? And then you pick based on stats. Is that, I know that's not the process, but can you tell people, how do you choose and how do students like stand out? And I know you've kind of talked about this a little bit, but just to reiterate.
A word you will hear most college admission offices who operate in a holistic or selective mode is context. Now, some admission offices operate in different ways. We have eligibility models where there's a basic formula of eligibility for admission, and the majority of colleges in the country admit the majority of students who apply. So this model doesn't necessarily apply to every college a student might consider. So it's important that students know how each college that they are thinking about is able to accommodate the number of students who are applying. But one of the key questions in our environment at USC is where did the student go to high school? Not because we prefer students from one school over another, but because we want to understand the resources that are available to that student. How many AP classes were available to Amy versus the student down the street? Did some students have 5 AP classes? For a school that offers 25, that's different than a school that offers 3, and they've managed to take 2 extra because they got an extra teacher, or they took one online, or they did a little more than was available. So that's the same basic record that looks very different because the opportunities were different. So we don't want to penalize a student if they did not have an opportunity available to them. We have some fundamental basic educational skills that are required for admission, but high schools in the United States tend to provide that. So we start looking more deeply than minimum math, minimum language, minimum English criteria. If you can graduate from high school, you're ready for college level work. But then the questions are less focused than that. The questions are, how can I imagine this student, now that I can see that they are capable, how can I imagine them making some sort of impact here? And that goes to story. What kind of impact does that student hope to bring to our community that I need to form? Are we? Is that in the classroom? Is that in the library or the laboratory, or on the athletic field, or as a community organizer, or in the neighborhood writing for the local newspaper? What does that look like for that particular student? And so the decision is less about number of AP classes or a specific test score or a criterion index-driven process than it is about that imagined, that vision, that story that I hope the student has been able to communicate to me and my colleagues. It's a difficult. It's more like deciding human beings make lots of big decisions like this. We are all accustomed to making decisions that do not have clear answers. What's your favorite cheeseburger? Is a great debate in my city of Los Angeles. The correct answer is In-N-Out, but oh boy, I mean, come on. But your Five Guys gets a lot of
DC base.
We got some Five Guys out here now. They're definitely moving in. Tommy's, they put chili on their cheeseburger. You'll get a strong Tommy's contingent. Okay. My wife will go down and say the Habit is way better than In-N-Out. She's wrong, but she's a great cook. So we know how to decide what we think is the best cheeseburger.
Right.
We buy houses this way. We buy cars this way. We choose mates. We choose employees in this very same way. Yet, for some reason, when we think about colleges making the same sort of choice, we think it's some
Magic
mysterious,
formula.
formulaic, inhuman process when it should just be human. And we hope to preserve that, as much of that as we can.
Well, like one of my theories is, and as somebody who studies sociology, I always try to like develop like a framework is a lot of students don't like the idea of it being so human. And so they try to reduce it down into like, this is the stat and this is what I have to do. And this is a formula. And when people come to me, sophomore, freshman, or even junior year, they're like, what activities should I be doing? Or what should I be investing for my student? I'm like, well, what are they interested in?
Right.
Give them money to do the things that they're interested in. Because what I find, and especially with the girls last year and the girls this year, is that if you give students the money or the resource of the time to do what they love doing, they just tend to do it well and they tend to do it better. And that tells a better story. I mean, I think Amy and I went through all of her activities, everything that she did. And I was like, okay, so we had to go through everything and say, okay, what's not here that is not part of the story? Like, is this, like 180 characters for your, activities? Is that telling the whole story? Or do we need to supplement with the essay or with the supplemental essays? What's not here that you need to communicate? Because this has to be a conversation. And ultimately, the one thing I think students will regret is if they get a rejection or a wait list and they're like, I wish I had done what I thought I wanted to. Like, I wish I had just written the essay I wanted as opposed to my parents.
I will get a recording of this video because that advice is outstanding. The making sure that the story is in there is essential, but it starts with making sure that you know what that story should be. So who are you? Where have you been? Who are you is what is your story, and how can you then put it into 180 characters here, 250 words here, this letter, that letter.
And then Amy, we've had how many conversations? I mean, we went through Amy, how many conversations? We probably had like 25 conversations about because I just looked at it and I was like, I would just get a sense. I'm like, there's something not in the story. Like, there's something not coming off the page. And I think when you do a good application, and I don't want to get on like a pulpit, but like when you do a good application, you can just feel it. Like, and I told Amy this, and she didn't believe me at first, but once you get it, it clicks. And once it clicks, you're like, nope, this is it. And I can tell when a student gets it because they're like, I'm not changing it. And I'm done. And you are not going to change this essay. This is who I am. This is going to the college. And if they reject it, I'm like, and here we are.
And that's if we reject it, that's our mistake.
Right.
Our problem. I wish we had room for everybody that we love.
Or sometimes not a mistake because I think
it's our loss.
Right.
Every student has something to bring.
But when you're 18, you think you want one thing, and sometimes not going to the college that you thought you wanted to go to is, for me, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So, but I think sometimes we get so caught up in thinking, like, what can I give you all, that we don't see this as sometimes the fit is just not right. That does not mean that you did not do enough. You didn't do your best. You didn't do your best work. Sometimes it's just the wrong fit, or sometimes it's just we don't have space and we would love to have you, but we just don't have the capacity.
That's 100% right. And this all to me fits in perfectly with this idea of doing your best. Right. If you feel like you put in your best effort and you told your story clearly and in a way that is 100% the persuasive case that you can make, and if it is not successful, then there are no regrets. You gave it your best, and there's no shame in doing your best, regardless of what anybody else thinks. You could not have done better than your best. So that's all I want to know is who you are.
And so maybe going into junior year or into senior year, the question shouldn't be like, how do I get ready for admissions? But like, how do I make sure that I have the best representation of me. So is there something that I haven't been able to do, especially in COVID, right? Like, is there something that I haven't been able to do that I could now do? Or is there a class that I haven't been able to take that I want to take next year? Or is there an opportunity that I haven't been able to explore, or maybe leadership that I need to step into that I've kind of been holding the reins back on that? So that's kind of where I try to push, is where you could be going, as in where could you be growing, and how can you demonstrate the impact that you can bring to a campus through either your past or through the vision that you have for the future. So
if it's March now and we're imagining beginning that thinking process starting now, there isn't a lot of time. The application will be due in, you're a better expert than I. Is it October, November, December?
I actually have all the dates right here. It depends. It depends. I mean, California, you guys are really early. So you guys are mostly like November-ish time frame.
So we've got 9 months.
Yeah.
And there isn't a lot of time to accomplish and change direction. My point is that most of this is already known, and it's up for us to look inward and understand what that information is. Who are we? And sure, and maybe we, in that reflection, realize, I'm playing piano to get into college,
and I hate it.
Not because I love it. I'd rather be reading to youngsters in the neighborhood, or working to clean up the trash on the street, or, boy, I see some homeless. I'm not specifically pointing at community efforts, but whatever effort comes to mind that might be a better use of that time. This is the beginning of a student taking control of deciding on how to spend their time. Hopefully that has happened before now, but if we think in this reflection at this point that we're going the wrong direction, then change direction. People change direction all the time.
Right.
That's great.
Especially in college. And I think sometimes I even see, I think the most interesting thing in one of the groups from last year is one of our students just said, I just keep noticing that every time they have a conversation about reopening schools, they never involve students. And so that just became her focus and her stick. And she did really well college admission season, but she just had something interesting to say, because that was a passion of hers. Like, bringing student voices to the forefront was a passion. And, you could kind of see it in her other activities, but then it kind of blossomed the summer before. So I think there's a lot of the book that has been written, but there's also opportunities. Amy, when you were looking, did you look at the essays for college your junior summers? Or how did you go about doing everything?
Honestly, I just searched up every single college that I wanted to apply to, and looked at the websites that are there. But I think it was just a lot of confusion, and a lot of how do I start, or where do I start the application?
Where should people start? Like, if everybody has all this information coming in, it's a little overwhelming. What do you feel like is a good first step for students?
Amy, are you talking about the essay prompts for the admission application?
The essay prompts, or just the application overall? Where do we start?
I don't know. This is off of my radar screen, and I will tell you, when my wife, who the habit person, she was asking me questions like this, and I didn't know the answers, and she wonders why I give presentations like this today, because she feels I'm useless when it comes to advising on the whole spectrum of colleges. I'm very familiar with my process and my school, and I'm somewhat familiar with processes of schools with which we sort of overlap or attract the same students. So I have a sense of the deadlines and notification dates of schools I would consider to be our competition. And I think that's a word that's worth pursuing a bit. But I don't know the current thinking and best strategies about organizing
all the
that
data.
process. I feel you, Amy. I part of being 54 is I was in that generation that had to apply to college on a typewriter, and so we only applied to a few places. You had to send away for an application, and if
We used to get them in the mail.
you got 2 copies, and if you messed one up, you only had one more shot. And this game of getting into a highly ranked place was not like it is today. The numbers of applications that students submit are much higher now. The number of seats and the number of students, while it has moved around a little bit, is not largely different. So to me, the market has not changed as much as people think it has, because each person is applying to more places. So our fears kick in. We throw in more applications. We get worried about the gamesmanship. We get worried about what the transcript should look like and what we're looking for, instead of being immune to those outside pressures and focusing on what we can do. What can we be in control of? But how to assemble the strategy of when to fill out all the forms, when to get in your financial aid forms, on your admission forms, which programs are early action, regular decision, early decision. I don't have good advice on the best strategy for that. I would hope that the school counselor and the student could take the time to organize that project on their own, and perhaps with the assistance of a tutor.
Yeah, I always say start with the school counselor. Like, start with the school counselor. And I always say, the one thing I wish students would ask is, what is a college that maybe my peers don't know about that you feel like would be a good fit for me? Like, what are some colleges that maybe are off my radar that need to be on my radar? Because
great idea.
Like they tend to know some of there's a lot of groupthink when it comes to like, where should we apply? And there might be a really special college for you that you just don't know. The other thing I always recommend is pull out everything and kind of figure out, like, what activities did I do? What, what's my academic record? What is, did I work? Did I take care of my siblings? Because that's actually an activity, that you can list. I look at all the things and I say to students when we start, if you could only pick 10 things that told the story of you, what would those 10 things be? And then what are the gaps? And so for me, every essay is filling in the gap, as opposed to, like, what do they want out of the essay? How can I communicate this gap? And does it fit into the prompt? And especially make sure you actually answer the prompt. But good advice. I don't need everything to be driven towards we kind of talked about this before, but I don't need the perfect answer for a supplemental or whatever, but I do want to know a little bit more about you each time I'm going through the application. And then I feel like a good application makes me feel like your ghost is in the room with me. So I understand who you are. I understand the impact that you've had on your community, and I can kind of get a lingering sense of who you could be if we offered you this opportunity. So, but sitting around with maybe the people who you're close with and saying, what are some ways that you've seen me have an impact in my community? Or what are some things that you're proud of that I've done, even with your friends? Because I think sometimes we discredit our friends. Sitting down with your friends and be like, what are some things that you feel like are inherently me? Amy, I know you did this at the lunchroom at one point. Like, you asked your friends about advice. Did that pan out?
Yeah, I think just talking to even the girls in the group and my friends around me, just talking to them about who am I as a person kind of helped. And even my mom, even talking to my family and stuff, that helped. It made my story better, I guess. It made everything plan out.
Was that difficult?
Yeah, it was difficult trying to find a story. But I think with Miss Jen, I think having a conversation is what helped me find my story. Because conversation, that's what literally made, I couldn't do it without having a conversation with Ms. Jen or my friends or my family.
I tell you, I would be terrified to ask others.
I
would only want to think about that on my own, and that's just a reflection of my own personal thought style and my own fears. So I've got to give respect to students who have the courage to leave themselves vulnerable to ask that question of their peers and demand an honest assessment. Oof, that sounds tough.
I don't even think we get honesty because you get like a lot of dancing, but you kind of start feeling like, even in those conversations, like I want to make, like somebody will say, I think it's this. And you'll be like, no, but what about this? And that's when you start to realize that was important to me. Like my application is not complete without that story. I know there's a lot of pressure from students to put the right answer into essays. And I know a lot of students, I remember one time we were working on an essay with a student and I said, why do you want to go to this college? And they listed all these reasons. And I was like, okay, but like, I still don't know why you want to go. And it turns out they had looked at something on the internet that said like, why do I want to go to this college? And I said, but like, why did you put this college on the list? And I think the student was so scared to get it wrong that they didn't ever think that to even think about why they actually wanted to go to college. What's your best advice for students who are, like, I think sometimes students are looking for the right answer for the essays, for the supplementals. You guys have a lot of supplementals, but like the supplementals, they just want to make sure it's right or perfect, or they look to like Reddit or YouTube or like successful essays. But what for you stands out? I know we kind of have gone over this multiple times, but when you're looking at an essay, is there a right formula? Is there a wrong formula? I know the answer, but can you kind of go over that?
I think that vision is what makes an application stand out.
Mm.
Most candidates are qualified for admission. We'll receive close to 69,000 applications this year. We'll offer admission to 8,200 roughly for fall of 2022. And I would guess that 10 or 15% have academic concerns, but 85 to 90% of those I'm guessing now are capable candidates. But many of them focus on eligibility. Here's what I have done. I have taken all of the classes that I understand to be required and the minimum, and I have achieved everything, and I have engaged in the activities that are widely known to be what everybody wants. And so here I am. And that only gets me to the start, yet it is often the end of what is purported to be a story. The next chapter is not written. And the ones that stand out show me a compelling path that is exciting to join. I dream of this. I want to do this. We are in the hope business. We're helping students realize their dreams. And if we can have a clear understanding of what that, as clear as possible, of what that feels like at the moment, and if we might be good partners together, for whatever reason, maybe we have the right program, maybe we're in the right place, maybe there's something here about the spirit that a student likes, then that's to me is how a student stands out. We still have more than we can accommodate. It's very tough to narrow those down. But I hope that students feel confident that we're making the best decisions that we can as human beings do. And if they have articulated that clearly, they will not feel like they don't have opportunities. They'll probably get into more places and have more opportunities. In terms of choosing those places, I think your question that you posed is a terrific one. Which school that my peers aren't thinking about do you think might be helpful for me? That's a very intriguing question. Another thing I'll steal if you don't mind.
No, you're fine.
I like it. But in that kind of situation, I think it's helpful for students to think not about name, but about criteria. If a name of a school is attractive, or if an institution seems like the right one, I think the helpful question is, what about that place is it that I like? Is it the size? Is it the location? Is it the beauty of the campus? Is it the choice of majors? Is it the composition of the class? Is it my ability to change majors, or to do a co-op, or to get internships, or to be away from the hustle and bustle of the city and focus on reading and thinking? What is it about that institution that I like? And then what other institutions also have that?
Mm.
We all have a lot of the same stuff. So finding out which places overlap and really getting down to what you need
Mm-hmm.
in your college search, I think should be what forms that list. Forming that list is the key way to feel in control.
Yeah, list or ride or die. Like if you don't get the list right, you can have a really bad season. And one thing I actually tell students to do, and they're surprised, Amy's heard this from me, is I say ask admissions officers. Like I think they forget that we spend time together. I mean, I have my little Twitter crew, as you know, but we spend time together. So sometimes even saying, I love this college, I love everything that you guys stand for, but at the end of the day, you guys can only take so many applicants. Are there other colleges that are like this college that you think should be on my radar? Admissions officers are not going to be like, well, Jimmy, thought you were serious about us, but apparently not. They also know, they might be like, hey, you should check out this college, or maybe you should check out this, or maybe they're like, I don't know, but if you love this area, there's some other colleges in this area. They're not, I think people think of admissions as so cutthroat that any question could be harmful to them. And no.
It makes me sad. One of the beautiful things about this business is that though we are in competition, our mutual goal is to help students become who they can be. And so when I lose a student to my friend at UCLA or my friends at Stanford or Columbia, Cornell, NYU, Berkeley, we feel great for them because I know the student has made a great decision for them and for their family. And I am sad that we have missed out on that opportunity.
Right.
And, we bid students farewell every year and we wish them luck. And many of them pick us and we compare notes. And it's a healthy system that has the student's best interest in mind. And I think it is corrupted when we focus on the gamesmanship angle.
Yep.
And is more likely to lead to mismatch or regret.
Mm-hmm.
We allow inauthentic decisions or stories to creep into the process. I think the process works really well when it's contained to truth.
Yeah. I always say, and Amy, you and I talked about this with the supplementals, we would just have a conversation about them back and forth. And then she would be like, sometimes it was just narrowing down to favorite movie. Because it's so, I mean, for me, it's easy. It's Into the Spider-Verse. But
that's a good choice.
No, 100%. 100%. As somebody who did not watch any Spider-Man movies before, I was like, this is it for me, right? And I could go into a whole dissertation about that at any point. But for Amy, I think sometimes you felt can you talk about feeling a little bit limited in what you could even discuss and how to make those choices at the end of the day?
I think it was hard to come up with something that was really you, because sometimes I feel students, they feel oh, okay, they want let's say favorite movie. They want favorite movie. Now you have to pick something and then turn it into a metaphor or turn it into something bigger than what it is. But I think that was hard to just really write about your favorite movie. It's not supposed to be a big thing.
Right. Can you feel it when somebody's I like Into the Spider-Verse because it showcases the pathway that we all should be taking in our life? Can you feel it when it feels off? And can a student recover when it's off?
Because that's in the context of so many other things, other ideas presented, it probably aligns with other things that are off if it's off.
Yeah.
Look, we understand that students are trying to impress us and trying to avoid admitting that they play video games or like the Habit hamburgers or anything that might be embarrassing. I'm going to get in trouble. Man. I love the Habit. This is not a sponsored show anyway. I love all cheeseburgers, but I do wish that students felt more comfortable admitting things that they think might be embarrassing, but I also accept that that is a lot to ask, and embarrassing isn't the right word, but so you do sometimes see it answers in the question. It's this movie, but for this reason, to try and help us understand why.
Yeah.
And I love that. It helps me learn more about the person that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. So, any last pieces of advice? I mean, I think admissions has this very perception of it being really cutthroat. And the one thing I hear from students is like, yeah, but he's like lying. And I'm like, he's not, though. Like, there's no incentive to lie. Like, he can reject the same number of applications being truthful and being dishonest. But is there any last pieces of advice besides like don't stress, eat in and out? I definitely got that. Eat in and out. Like I have learned from this webinar.
Choose what's best for you, really, I think.
But if I go and I eat a habit burger now, I'm gonna be like, I don't know.
It's good. That's good.
Okay. But is there any last piece of advice that you have for students and what they could be not like doing, but any last pieces of advice as they enter upon the big admission season and start making their first steps?
Financial aid comes to mind.
You just dropped a bomb.
We could have a long conversation about cost. And what's weird about this product, if we're going to use cost as a business term, is that the price that's printed is not paid by the majority of purchasers. Some people pay a tiny fraction of that price, and some people pay the full price. So we, unlike any other purchase, this product is so variable in price because there's so many parties interested in a student going to college that are willing to put money into that. The federal government, perhaps your state government, perhaps your local community, your parents. And we kind of work this out and really give each individual student their own personalized price. You know, that might be called a grant, it might be called a scholarship, it might be called, well, there are loans as well. I think the word coupon is really good. It's this weird concept that the business that's charging you also prints you a coupon to pay that same bill. Yeah. So I have an office that's going to collect that bill from everybody, but there's another office upstairs that's going to print really big coupons for students who need them the most. Our job is to fill the classrooms with lots of different viewpoints, and students' ability to pay might represent a different viewpoint. I want that classroom to be filled with different ideas so that we can all learn from each other. I want rich kids next to poor kids. I want students from DC next to students from LA. I want students who think the Habit is way better than the In-N-Out next to students In-N-Out. Why are we talking about cheeseburgers? I keep going we know that the conversation will be more fruitful, that the education will be better the more diverse that room is, and we need students from all over to be in there. So students who are looking at the printed price and denying themselves admission, because this is especially true for private schools.
Oh, especially true for private schools.
They may be missing out on opportunities that might be surprisingly less expensive for their individual price tag. So that's the one thing that I don't know if we've touched on enough, and I trust that you've got other experts coming in.
Yeah.
The other thing I think the part that I think though is most important is that if students are afraid of getting in, they are forgetting that we are also afraid, we colleges are afraid that they won't come, or that they won't be interested or won't apply. We spend a lot of our time, admission officers spend a lot of their time promoting coming to this institution. Like any product, I need this population to not only please the faculty, but also enroll the right number of students. We need students. We are nothing without students. We're nothing without you, Amy, or you viewers, we go away if we don't have students.
Yeah.
We need students. So you're an important part of our community as well. You will become that and stay with that forever. So when I hear students so worried about getting in, they don't remember that I'm worried that they won't apply or they won't choose us when they do get into the competition that might be cheaper or closer to home or more highly ranked. Or whatever it is that they're looking for.
But your campus is so beautiful.
Come on and visit.
Listen, you go on I tell people you go on a visit to USC, you're probably going.
Please visit. We're now open for tours.
We actually have one question from an 11th grader in Virginia. I don't have many extracurriculars. Do I need to have a lot of extracurriculars to get into my dream school?
I appreciate the question. Thank you very much. And boy, having read applications now in COVID, we're definitely seeing the impact of the availability of getting out and getting involved. And we're also seeing students creatively finding ways to spend that time as we emerge now, as we were stuck in lockdown for so many months and even now over roughly 2 years. There is not a magic formula of activities that is expected or required. It's the same idea of helping us understand your story answers this question, I hope. We want to understand how students have spent their time. We want to understand outside of school what makes up the rest of their story, and how a student spends their time is a part of that. Ms. Jen mentioned earlier that things that are activities are not often thought of by students as activities. We're thinking about sports or clubs or organized community service, but we're not thinking about cooking dinner for siblings while parents are working. That's an important activity. I read a compelling case, a tear-jerking case just recently of a young woman who spent 30 hours a week caring for her grandmother who was suffering from Alzheimer's. And this was listed on her resume as an activity, 30 hours a week, 50 hours. That's almost a full-time job on top of, what is it, 30 hours of school or 20, I don't know how many hours of school. But that also fit into her story. She learned about the perils of taking care of our health today, and we learned about how families must stick together. We've learned about how as we get older our needs change and that we depend on each other, and perhaps recalibrated what we know to be important. So that's one line on a resume, but it fits into a larger story about who that person is, where they're going, where they've been, and how they plan to make an impact here. I think this student was pre-med and was thinking about neuroscience because grandma was starting to suffer from the effects, as many of us will, of just aging, and so that all made perfect sense. So there is no magic answer. I think the key question is what choices are you making and why, and tell us why.
And I always say, like, why. When somebody said I didn't do a lot of extracurriculars, I always say why. And like sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, I was home with, my siblings, or even, and this has come up a lot, and I'll be very transparent. I was depressed during the pandemic and I just couldn't get out of that. That's a story. Like you're not going to write like 30 hours a week depression, but you can tell that story. And then do you want to get involved? How do you want to get involved? So I think that asking why weren't you able to get involved? What were the things in your way? Like transportation sometimes was in the way. Needing to take care of a sibling was in the way. Needing to work was in the way. So that's part of the story. Or I took on more than I could chew at school. That's a story too. And how did you cut back so that you could start enjoying your time and activities? I think that to me is really tells us a story. I know Amy and we talked about that a lot in your application, because coming back from COVID, one of the stories that we kind of uncovered was how she got involved with her making sure that this community came back to what she remembered pre-pandemic. And
Wow.
so so that was part of her story, was like the one part that we felt was missing in Amy's application, if you remember that, Amy, is how she brought everybody back together. Like, just, I think it was like Senior Sunrise, right?
Yeah, Senior Sunrise.
Yeah, the Senior Sunrise moment. I just remember through those conversations I said, when was a moment that I felt whole again? And she's like, Senior Sunrise. And so that has to be part of the story. So if you're worried about, like, I don't have enough, I think first of all, there's not enough in terms of like you were saying, Kirk, there's not enough. But also, if you're worried that you don't have enough, then ask what you were doing with that time. And that actually might matter. And that might be something that somebody else is not bringing to campus, that you could be bringing to campus. So.
I think that's all 100% correct. I will add that I would caution students against focusing on deficit orientation or mindset. I do sometimes see students who are apologizing for what they have not done or what they have not achieved, with the assumption that we have some expected minima. And we can examine any situation with a couple of different mindsets, including what have we learned and what will we try next versus what went wrong and who's to blame. And if we focus on the who's to blame part, that's not helpful. And I think brings it saps that dream and that sense of hope that I know is in there.
Yeah.
And I hope that this application process helps a student separate regret from hope and focuses on that. We've all learned, and we cannot learn without failing. We've hopefully that is not regret as much as a lesson. And I sometimes feel sad for students who are so worried about apologizing for something I wouldn't have noticed had they not pointed it out.
Yeah, I always say focus on the positive. You bring what you can bring, pack whatever you can pack into the suitcase, and just let it ride.
Right now, that's really hard.
Yeah,
it's really hard right now.
It's just know that there's a college. Can I just say this? I know we've said it before. There's a college out there that's looking for you. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know it feels like everybody is like so competitive, but there are so many colleges looking for you. And if at the end of this process, I'm going to tell the story, I'm going to let you go, Kurt, but like I had a student last year, April, was like, I want to go to college. I thought I wanted to take a year off. I don't. I want to go to college. Is there a possibility? Yes, there's rolling colleges. There's so many colleges that are out there looking for you. And it's just you're finding the right fit and finding a college that wants you for you, as opposed to trying to fit into this model. Like,
I think any college will be lucky to have you. And, and it's your job to tell me why.
Oh,
we'd be lucky to have you, Amy. Right?
You just killed it, crushed it. That was. I'm gonna have to. I'm like looking at the timestamps, so because I'm gonna make some clips. But Kirk, we love having you. I'm gonna try this habit burger. I'm gonna try. I had an In-N-Out burger. I'm gonna try this habit burger. I'm gonna try it side by side when I come to California. But please bring the weather. If you could push it to the East Coast, we'd appreciate it. I'm gonna end the broadcast and then we'll say goodbye to you, Kirk. But
thank you. We'll talk about tacos next time.
Ooh, we should have led with that. Okay. Okay, but end the broadcast and we'll say goodbye to you, Kirk. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.